All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring something that affects literally every single one of us, how we process endings. And I mean everything, from finishing up your daily chores, zooming all the way out to, well, the end of the world. We're calling this journey finality and flux, because whether you're just trying to clear your inbox or you're contemplating the ultimate fate of human civilization, the way we handle finality actually shapes our behavior in some pretty profound ways. We're going to look at the tools we use to manage this, starting with personal productivity, moving on to political structures, and eventually how we visualize the apocalypse itself. Sound good? Let's get into it.
So think about that nagging, everyday anxiety of unfinished business. We have absolutely all been there, right? You're jamming out to a really catchy song, someone interrupts you, the music stops, and bam, suddenly that melody is just endlessly looping in your brain for the rest of the day. Or, maybe you're just trying to chill on the weekend, but the thought of that one overdue assignment or that half-finished work project just keeps creeping in and totally ruining your vibe. It begs the question, why is it so incredibly difficult for our brains to just let go of the things we haven't finished?
Well, the answer actually has a name. It's called the Zeigarnik effect. This is the psychological tendency we have to remember interrupted or unfinished tasks way, way better than the ones we've actually completed. It's literally just how our brains are wired. And this might actually explain why massive historical high achievers, think Benjamin Franklin or Leonardo da Vinci, relied so heavily on their famous to-do lists just to clear their minds. By writing things down, they were essentially offloading that mental burden. It's like they realized centuries ago that if they didn't put their tasks on paper, this Zeigarnik effect would guarantee those unfinished ideas would just keep buzzing around in their heads, totally preventing them from focusing on their actual, brilliant work.
And today, to cope with this weird psychological quirk, we've developed an absolute mountain of productivity frameworks. We've got the Eisenhower method, the 1-2-3 method, Eat That Frog, the super popular bullet journal, the list goes on. We are constantly searching for that perfect system to just conquer our unfinished business. But looking at all these crazy complex methods, it kind of raises a fascinating question. Like, would we actually be mentally healthier if we spent our time remembering the things we actually got done? Think about it. What if, instead of an endless to-do list, we just kept a done list to celebrate our completions rather than constantly stressing over our interruptions?
The famous writer Umberto Eco actually had a really interesting take on this. He believed we are fundamentally drawn to organizing the chaos around us. Get this. He even held an entire exhibit dedicated just to lists at the Louvre. Whether it's a basic, practical daily to-do list or some ancient piece of poetry, Eco argued that making lists is literally our primary human defense mechanism against the overwhelming, infinite chaos of the universe. It's wild to think about, but we use lists to impose boundaries, to create a sense of order, and really, to manage our anxiety about all the things we haven't quite conquered yet.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. That brings us to part 1, when leaders lose power, the politics of endings.
So taking this idea of finality to a macro level, there's a pretty stark contrast between how different nations handle political endings. On one hand, you have what's called a caretaker government. You see this in places like Bangladesh, where a temporary, totally neutral administration steps in to run things until an election is completely wrapped up. It's designed to ensure a stable transition. But then contrast that with the lame duck system we see in places like the United States. When leaders are limited to 2 four-year terms, they inevitably become lame ducks as that final term starts running out. Their power and their influence just organically drain away because, naturally, the whole country turns its attention to the newer candidates who might actually win the next election.
And you know who understood this loss of power perfectly? Queen Elizabeth I. She actually talked about the inconstancy of the people of England, pointing out how folks always seem to look past the current government and fix their eyes on whoever is next in line to succeed. She understood this human tendency so profoundly that she famously chose to delay naming her successor for as long as humanly possible. Because she knew for a fact that the very second she named who was coming next, she'd immediately become a lame duck. Her own power would just completely evaporate. Which brings up a really fascinating thought experiment about leadership transitions. Let's say you were advising a leader who wanted to hold on to power and totally avoid that lame duck status. What would you even tell them? Would it actually be better for a country's overall stability if there were just no limits on how long someone could lead? Or maybe taking a page right out of Queen Elizabeth's book, what if absolutely no one knew who the next leader would be until after the current one left or passed away? It's wild, but it really forces us to think about how just the pure anticipation of an ending actively changes the power dynamics of the present moment.
Moving right along to part 2, predicting the end, humanity's doomsday obsession.
Now, if you think about it, people have been repeatedly predicting, and hilariously enough, rescheduling, doomsday for centuries.
I mean, way before viral social media was even a thing. Back in 1666, with London literally on fire and plagued by illness, people were absolutely convinced the end of the world had arrived. Then you have the Millerites in 1844, the massive, widespread panic over Halley's Comet in 1910, the whole technological freakout of the Y2K bug in the year 2000, and, oh yeah, who could forget the infamous Mayan apocalypse in 2012? It's like we just have this incredibly deep-seated psychological need to believe the end is always nearish. We're basically always standing on street corners with our metaphorical, or sometimes literal, signs of doom.
Today, though, instead of reading tea leaves or tracking comets, we actually try to quantify this existential dread with more modern tools, like the famous doomsday clock. It's this symbol trying to measure our exact proximity to the end of civilization in minutes to midnight. But here's a question for you. Does having a giant symbolic clock actually motivate us to step up and solve global problems? Or does it really just validate our absolute worst Zeigarnik effect anxieties, but like on a planetary scale?
Let's look at how this impacts culture in Part 3, Art of the Apocalypse, Visualizing the End.
It is absolutely fascinating to see the shift in our collective fears over time when you look at art. Think back to the European Renaissance. You had legendary artists like Durer, Botticelli, and Michelangelo, right? They depicted the end of the world as this terrifying but weirdly orderly cosmic judgment. It was all very heavily focused on divine retribution and the four horsemen of the apocalypse. But then you jump forward to the modern era and you look at artists like Otto Dix or Sabi Menyahai, and it is a totally different kind of apocalypse. Their themes center entirely around the sheer, gritty devastation of industrial warfare, World War I, and digital collapse. It's crazy to see how our ultimate fear shifted from this top-down divine judgment to literal destruction by our own technological hands.
And hey, the apocalypse even has its own evolving soundtrack. Musicians have used vastly different techniques to capture the chaotic moods of their specific eras. For example, you have Olivier Messiaen composing the incredibly haunting Abyss of the Birds, literally while sitting in a prisoner of war camp back in 1940. Then fast forward to 1970, and you've got Black Sabbath dropping heavy, distorted riffs in Electric Funeral to perfectly capture that looming Cold War nuclear dread. And then by 1987, REM comes along and gives us that frantic, upbeat, overwhelmingly chaotic stream of consciousness in It's the End of the World as We Know It. It's so cool because each piece perfectly captures the specific flavor of doom relevant to its exact moment in time.
Which brings us right to our present reality in Part 4, the real doomsday clock, climate volatility.
So before an ecosystem actually just collapses, researchers have noted that there are real, measurable signs of chaos. Think of it as an early warning system. First, we see extreme volatility, like, for example, sudden, rapid fluctuations in the amount of chlorophyll in a lake. That kind of chaos always precedes catastrophe. And the scary thing is, we are seeing this exact pattern globally right now. We're seeing a massive surge in extreme weather events like super frequent hurricanes and severe, prolonged droughts. It's even impacting us up in the skies. Commercial flights are currently facing measurably increased global turbulence. You see, these aren't just random, isolated events. They are the literal scientific signatures of a complex system that is nearing a critical threshold. And this actually leads us to a pretty controversial modern reality. There are investors out there actively looking to financially benefit from this exact climate volatility. Yeah, rather than just focusing solely on prevention, there's a whole growing sector of business seeking out opportunities that are directly tied to a warming Earth. Whether that means investing in brand new shipping routes that are only opening up because the ice is melting, or dumping money into companies that specialize in disaster recovery and resilience. The changing climate is increasingly being viewed by some strictly through the lens of market opportunity. So as we confront the very real possibility of passing a point of no return, I want to leave you with a final profound ethical question to chew on regarding the future of our planet. Should people be allowed to profit from rising temperatures? Could you even imagine a scenario where a company intentionally contributes to climate change purely just to benefit its own financial interests? It's definitely a stark thought to end on, but it perfectly ties together our deep psychological anxieties about finality with the very real practical actions happening out there in the world today. Anyway, I really hope this explainer has given you a totally new framework for thinking about endings, everything from checking off your daily to-do list all the way to pondering the future of the globe. Thanks for joining me.